Hello everyone and welcome back to day 2 of the Inktober 2025 Zentangle edition here on the Tangles and Tunes channel. I'm back today with my wife Gayle.
Hello.
And we are going to draw it together and show you the results at the end. But we're going to add today's tangle, which is called Seedways, and it is by Carla Juran. And we're going to have that information, of course, in the description box. But let's jump right in and start drawing. This is sort of a kind of a cool tangle with some overlaps and different ways to be used. But I'm going to use it in its most basic form here. I'm going to just create a ribbon that extends from like it's coming from behind my nameplate and weaves its way up to the top of my page or the edge of my page. I'm going to kind of catch it just underneath here. I like to create that overlap for dimensioning later, but I'm not going to add a lot of it. You could also do it in circle formats and all kinds of neat ways, but I need to make sure I have enough space for all the 31 days here on my page, so I'm not going to fill too much of it with this single tangle or with any single tangle. And as we get toward the end, if we have other room, we've got lots of different things we can do. So today we're going to start right here. I'm going to create a curved line that goes from about here and just reaches up. We could, of course, go straight, but then that's not quite as interesting to look at. And then I'm going to keep this somewhat narrow just so it has a nice ribbon effect. And we're going to draw this in our mind behind here, right? And then we're going to come up just like that. And one of the things we'll do right off the bat is we'll create an aura to each of these lines that's pretty close. It just gives it a little more stand out, if you will, from other tangles that might come up against close to it there, or against it closely. I can't even talk here this morning. But we also want to use it as a little enhanced border. I'm going to flip my tile around since it's a little easier to draw it this way. And it's not a tile, I know that. It's a piece of paper. I should have warmed up my hands. I'm having some trouble keeping my line steady there. All right, so now that we've got our basic ribbon shape, the next part of drawing this tangle is to create some little seed shapes that follow along the center, almost like we're making a little highway here with the dashed line, but instead of dashes, we're going to use little seed shapes. Now, these might need to be sculpted a little bit as we use our tangle, as we bring it all together, but we want to start with this pattern in the best way we can. So just sort of a little shape in the center there. And then you go up a little ways. But I would say you don't want them super close because we do have to do some lines that are going to come off of these. So make sure you give yourself a little space, but if you give too far or go too far, then the pattern sort of gets lost in the process. So kind of gauge that a little bit. I know it's a very subjective thing to say here, and it's hard to explain that, but you'll see kind of what I'm making of this as we go. So I'm just putting in those little shapes, roughly that same distance apart and approximately in the center of this little ribbon that we've created. And we'll just work our way up or down, however you're doing it, whatever direction. Just like that. Take it right off the page. So now we have that. Now, the official step out for this tangle, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. The official step out indicates that you should make little dashes or hatch marks on each side roughly between or in the center of these shapes. Now, we can certainly do that, but if you're comfortable just visually finding that spot, it's a step you don't have to do. And I'll show you though here. I'll do one or two with it. So if I would put a little mark like there, a little mark there, and then roughly halfway, a little mark, and a little mark, and so on. And what the idea is that you're going to create a line, a curved line that comes off that little seed shape and connects with that little hatch mark that you made, or a little dash or dot. So you would come off the far side, down like that. Now what the other side is for is you would come up from the opposite side again and connect like that. So if we had one up here, of course, that would come up around. We're not going to draw that. And so this one we could complete by connecting like that. But you can also, if you're comfortable finding that spot, you can just draw it without needing to do those little marks. It's totally up to you. Both ways are equally valid, and it just depends on your comfort with finding that spot or that approximate spot and being able to continue with the pattern. So we end up with something that looks like that. Now I can just go from that opposite side and connect roughly in that halfway spot again. So feel free to use the dots if you like that. If it's more comfortable to have a target zone, so to speak, that's 100% fine. And now that we have those lines in place, this is where sometimes we have to sculpt these little seed shapes to kind of make it look like it's connected there properly. Or completely, I should say, not that there's a properness to it. But the next thing we want to do is make a dual or double or auraed line for each of these that we've drawn. So go right up to, let me zoom in here. We're going to go right up to this and follow it around. And the same here, right up to the other line. Follow that around. So this one we would have right like that. So one more time, whoops, one more time here, right from the line. We just aura that initial line. And here we do the same thing. We aura that initial line. And we're just connecting all of these pieces. So I'll zoom back out just for a little more comfort details here, and then we'll go around and we'll just complete this step for all of the lines that we've drawn. Now once that's done, this is the most basic form of Seedways. But we're going to add a little bit additional detail, which is just a variation. Even the original step out indicates that we can do these different options. But I want to show you something about it. So let me once again zoom in. So to make a nice additional portion to this pattern, make it a little more elaborate, we want to imagine that these lines are continuing across. So you would sort of in your mind draw that double line across here and then ink this area. And what it does is it creates a sense that this is a bigger whole, one big piece in this pattern with this piece going inside of it. And so what we do is we do that from both directions. I like to think of it wherever it curves upward or downward, wherever that curve is, we're going to the inside of that area to create this pattern. So it's however it helps you to think about it. But just bring that across. Now we could just jump right in and say, oh, I'm just going to create a dark area here and some lines. But if it doesn't look like it connects, the illusion is not as effective, in my opinion. So if we just randomly filled this area in, and created that extra line, you would still finish the pattern. It would still work, but it wouldn't be, like I said, as effective. So I like to take the extra moment and draw this a little more carefully to help complete that shape as a piece. And then the same from this direction. I just think it's a little more effective in conveying that interwoven sense to all these pieces. So here again we have an inner part. It's coming right from there. And that also means that not all of these will be identically sized based on how we're connecting that curve. So here is our inner curve there. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying with the inner curve. It's just on the, I'll show you here in 1 second just to clarify. So when we have a curve, here's our curve. This is the inside of the curve. This is the outside of the curve. So we're adding these shapes to the inside, but we're following it from this other direction. And if it's not perfect or your curves are sharper than you intended because you didn't know we were going to do this part, that's fine. Don't let it be a point of stress for you in your drawing, but just pointing out a way to help. Sometimes that extra moment can make our drawing a little more effective with this weaving in and out pattern. And if you like this type of pattern, take a look at designs, tangles by the artist Tomas Padros. He's a CZT, but he's also an artist. I'm not certain, but I think in real life he's in real life, like we're on a cartoon or something. But I think his occupation is that he's an art teacher, I believe, over in Spain. I may be incorrect about that, but the guy's amazing with his tangle design. They're so intricate and so detailed and precise. He's very, very impressive. And if you like that sort of design and that sort of attention to detail, I would say take a look, and I think you'll like what he does. I just realized my camera's been extra zoomed in this whole time, so I hope I haven't been off camera for 90% of this. If so, I apologize. That's very frustrating. I know when that happens. So here we've got, now this piece is kind of going back behind things here. So now here we get to bump right up against our other tangle pattern. Do the best we can there. And then this we would imagine is probably coming from the other direction, so we can't see it, so we can be a little more free with how we do that piece right here. All right, so let me zoom back out, and I apologize if I was off screen. My goodness, that'd be frustrating. So there we go. We've got our completed tangle shape, so now we can just go right to the shading. And this is very simple in the Zentangle fashion. We want to shade or create that sense of shadow wherever we have overlap, right? So these little pieces are going underneath there, and then these are doing the same, and so on. So we'll just add a little hint of graphite along there that we can blend with our tortillon. Don't you just love saying that word? Tortillon. Sound like a wannabe French guy here. All right. And once we get this graphite laid down in all the appropriate overlap areas, we can also decide if we want to sort of create a recessed look to it, meaning that these patterns are recessed beyond or beneath our border or edge. That's not required, but if you wanted to have that appearance, you would just add a little bit of graphite along the edges here that we could blend outward and create a little sense of shadow or depth there. Now, one thing I would suggest is if you drew your pattern very narrow, so let's say you didn't have as wide a space to work with, then adding this extra graphite on both edges plus the overlaps, it might get a little muddy, as I call it. It might get a little too dark or a little too much shadow. You could certainly still try it, but that's just something to be aware of, because if everything becomes a shadow, then nothing is a shadow. So just kind of think about that as you go through the process there. I'm going to go ahead and add it on mine. I think there's sufficient room here. And then we have a question here. these pieces overlap. So let's create a little shadow around there. And this little area could get, as I call it, muddy, but it will still show that depth and layering in our drawing, which is the more and more pieces we add, the more evident those details will become, and it's just really fun. So now we can take our blending stump, our tortillon, and we can make these shadows blended out a little bit. It really helps with that sense of over and under when we blend this in and make those little shadows stand out. And here in this area, this is where it's going to have a little heavier sense of shadow, but hopefully that will work for us and not against us as we make that shape appear to be behind or in front of another one. Whoops, I missed a little spot right down here. Okay, so if I angle that a little bit, it might be easier to see without the glare. And you can touch this up if you want to add a little darker or a little more broad shadow if that appeals to you and looks fine on your drawing. But we just want to create that effect of depth. So that is what I ended up with this tangle, adding it to the page. Gayle, what did you come up with?
That's mine.
Nice. Very nice. I like how it has a different dimension, almost like it's getting further away from us and smaller as it goes. That's cool. So let's look here. Let me zoom back out. And I like to do our side by side just so people can see that. Very nice.
Cool. That was fun.
Well, good. Well, I hope you all had fun with this one today, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone again with our next video as we continue the Inktober 2025 series. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.